Mark chapter 13, verses 24 through 37. But in those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens shall be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out angels and gather the elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey. And he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on watch. Therefore, keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or at dawn, or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
In the name of our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on it being received for good or for evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. That's how Charles Dickens begins A Tale of Two Cities. It seems like the world is always coming to an end. Someone's always saying it's all about to fall apart. There are wars and rumors of wars. We're often faced with someone telling us the end is upon us. Or at least we're about to face changes so massive that we could never even imagine it. Think about the world 50 years ago. 3 years ago. But it's a time of simple life, something a little warmer, something to hearken back to, but something also that seems pregnant with devastation. Again and again, we find ourselves on this precipice, and we look to people to grab a hold of, something to anchor us, and always keep in mind that if someone provides you an anchor, they're probably doing something with their left hand. And if they tell you that you should read the Bible right next to the newspaper, they're probably just trying to scare you. And if they're referring to the book of Revelation or biblical prophecy, usually they're indulging in a game of decoding a kind of idiopathic form of interpretation that sort of plagues our modern times. I mean, these passages came up. Someone wrote this passage. I didn't choose the Daniel passage. Someone chose these passages. And the question was, well, when is the world going to end? Can it be decoded? Are we supposed to sort of look at Daniel and like figure out, well, this means this and this means that and the other things this? I don't think so. Daniel is an apocalypse. An apocalypse means not the end of the world, but it means to reveal. Literally, like in the Greek, it means to unveil. It means to reveal something that was previously hidden. And the stuff in Daniel, the stuff in the book of Revelation, it's a particular kind of genre that didn't exist before and now kind of does. It kind of cropped up in the early hundreds BC. And Daniel is like the first classic standard version of this particular kind of literature, this particular kind of genre of almost like a poetry, and it becomes a standard. The book of Revelation is not the only apocalypse. Even in the Bible, the reading that we have from Jesus is a kind of apocalypse. We have it in Matthew, we have it in Mark, we have it in Luke. It occurs again and again. After the book of Revelation, we have many apocalypses. The apocalypse. Dante's Inferno is an apocalyptic kind of story. And these stories, these genres have particular characteristics, right? So, what are those? Well, you have a heavenly messenger and or a guide. We have this in the book of Revelation. We have this in Daniel. An angel appears and often will bring you on a journey somewhere, or will take you to the heavens or take you to the ends of the earth and show you something, like out of a horror movie or out of a science fiction movie. Right? Dante has Virgil guide him around through the Inferno, through the Paradiso, through the Purgatory, right? And it is a message about change, about transition, that things are about to happen. And in that change, usually there's going to be suffering, there's going to be devastation. It has a sort of bleak view of the now or the soon to be. But, and this thing no one really gets, they read the apocalypse and they think, oh, it's the end of the world. It's a good news story. It's a story about acknowledging all the terrible things that are happening now. They're going to get worse, but don't worry. God is going to save us. God is going to save the world. God is going to rescue us. It is always good news at the end. And the way of telling that story is this sort of story of a battle between good and evil. There are these dualisms, good and evil, dark and light, heaven and hell. There's no gray in Daniel. There's no gray in the Apocalypse of John, or we might know it as the Revelation of John. There's no gray, right, in the sheep and the goats. It's a dualism. Many of those who sleep in the dust shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky, and those who lead the many to righteous like the stars forever and ever. Very dualistic in how it portrays itself. And there are these sort of mirrored worlds, that comes out of this dualism. A huge part of Apocalypse, what is being unveiled is sort of like what's going on behind the scenes. So you don't just look out and see a plague. You see an angel with a bowl that pours it out on the earth, and that's the plague coming down. You go up to heaven. You don't just talk about Christians being martyred. You go up to heaven and you see the martyrs gathered under the altar. You don't just talk about the passage of time. You have two angels standing on a stream, and one asks the other, how long is this going to be? And the other answers, a time and a time and a half a time. Blessed are those who survive or hold through and endure through the 1,000-something days, blah, 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 right? You have these scenes of heaven and scenes upon the earth, right? Just classic storytelling. And along with that, it's sort of fantastical, right? You have monsters and beasts and angels. I mean, like I said, the closest thing we have today are like horror movies and science fiction. Right? Do you think a horror movie or science fiction? Now, sometimes they're like trying to foretell the future, or they're trying to speak to what's going on in the world. You know, I mean, Star Wars is about the hero's journey. It's also about the dangers of totalitarianism, and it's about the Nazis. You know, it's a warning story. Be careful with power. Right? So we continue to tell these kinds of stories about the human journey, about human society, where it's been, where it's going. It just tells us with, bizarre creatures. Right? So we have this particular genre or art form, right, that has this depth to it. But when we lose the ability to do the kind of allegorical interpretation that I've been talking about, we move from this sort of deep, rich symbolism into simply decoding, a narrow, shallow kind of symbolism. And decoding, one thing means one thing. A is a substitution for T, because if it doesn't do that, it doesn't work, right? It's not like a poem or a poet, poetry. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best in dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellow to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. So, what is the symbolism of the woman? Which woman is this in history? Who is Byron talking about? What night is he particularly referring? No. That's not what poetry is not meant to be decoded, and neither is Apocalypse. All of this sort of decoding stuff, it gains traction really in the 19th century. A guy named Darby, and then you have the Millerites. Have you heard about those guys? You can look them up. They say, oh, God, Jesus is going to return at this date, and that didn't work out. And then another date, and that didn't work out. I mean, it's a whole story, right? But it really, in our sort of current consciousness, it sort of reaches the nadir of its sort of brainless, fatuous, imbecilic, inane, moronic pablum in the 70s in a book called The Late Great Planet Earth, which is bad enough, but it sort of turned into this terrible, cliched, sophomore, kind of half-witted prose in a series called The Left Behind novels, which I put in quotes. Sorry, I hope I didn't insult a book you like. I don't like this. It's cold outside, It's a harsh day. Harsh judgment. Black and white. But I mean, this sort of half-witted nonsense, that decodes this amazing description of these demonic monster locusts coming up from the fiery pit in the book of Revelation. And the author says, oh, I know what that is. That's an attack helicopter. Oh, really? Come on. That's not to me that apocalypses are just like general nothing stories. They're talking about, obviously, sometimes actually kind of specific things, and it's pretty obvious if you know a little about history, you do a little research. The book of Daniel is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes and the revolts that happened against the rulers in the middle 100s. Right? This is what the commemoration of Hanukkah is all about, the reestablishment of an actual kingdom in Jerusalem, a kingdom of Israel, after they returned from the exile in Persia. Jesus is using the same kind of language, the same symbolism to talk about the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, which is a Roman response to the Jewish revolts of the 60s. Jesus is warning that this was going to happen again. And you didn't have to be some kind of clairvoyant, seer to know this. If you looked around, you knew tough times were about to come. Things were bad. Jesus saying they're going to get worse. The center is not going to hold. Things are going to fall apart. And this is how you should respond. What both of these apocalyptic discourses are about though, and this is something important, they are not about the end of the world. They're about the end of an age. They're about the end of a sort of common foundation of life and the appearance of a new one. For people reading the book of Daniel, they would not only return from exile and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, which happens in Nehemiah and Ezra, there would also be a reestablishment of a kingdom with their own kings, which actually happens in the Hasmonean dynasties. You can read about it. It's there. Jesus, he's telling his followers that the temple and all of its sort of religious and civic and family and societal centrality that it carries with it is about to go away. And daily life for him, for his Jewish brothers and sisters, would be changed and transformed. And something completely different would arise. And that is exactly what happens. The destruction of the temple gives birth to two different religions, two different ways of being Jewish. One is rabbinical Judaism, and the other is Christianity. That's the meaning of these passages. That's what they're talking about. That's what they're rooted in. That's their meaning. Now, I'm not going to go into them diegetically. I mean, that would take a long time. Reread them. I mean, it's numbers and angels and everything. It's confusing. That would just take too long, and I don't think we need to do that. But we need to pay attention to them, or remember that they are always allegorical. They're always pointed at something else. Nothing, obviously. I don't think anyone reads it literally. At least I hope not. That there are actually these beasts roaming around. There are actual beasts that come. I mean, even like the sort of, Darbyites don't think that the beast coming from the sea is actually a beast out of the sea. They say, well, that's the Antichrist, or that's this, or whatever, right? So, question, again, though, in how we understand Scripture is significance. You can just enjoy these apocalypses, I think, as literature. They're creative, they're imaginative, but there are also different ways to go about understanding them too, like poetry, right? Apocalypse has this very rich framework. It's a really big bell with lots of different harmonies, lots of full harmonic sequences that sort of create lots of different resonances. At a very personal level, when I listen to what Jesus says at the very end, I don't know if you remember what he says. He says, I don't just say this to you, but I say this to all. Keep awake. Keep awake. That's something, in some ways, all of life and all of spirituality is about waking up, opening your eyes, waking to the truth of life, to the presence of God, to the unimaginable varieties of how love can exist in human relationship. Learning to set aside, the distractions and temptations, the things that are a little too soothing, that are a little too comfortable outside of us, but also within us. To come out of our slumber into the light of God's presence, to keep awake, to let the light shine. We could also think about it more broadly. I mean, when I was reading these, this is what came to my mind this week. Do you know this? Do you know this story? Is this familiar to anyone? Anyone ever watch YouTube? Do you know this? Okay, good. All right. This is for you, Brendan. This guy is called Mr. Beast. He is I think he's the biggest YouTuber in the world right now, or close to it. He's super rich. YouTube's made him really rich. And he does these kind of, I don't know, you call them stunts or maybe gestures, nice gestures. He goes around and just gives people money. He goes to subscribers and gives people money. He goes, apparently there was some kind of He was supposed to go and buy everyone's grocery at a store somewhere, a grocery store, and people heard about it, and so they flooded the store, and he couldn't go. And it was a mess for the store. Anyway, so this is the actual thumbnail for the video. He went and he paid for 1,000 people to get a surgery that was quick and easy, took about 10 minutes, so that they could see again. Now, this caused all kinds of chaos, because some people were saying, what is this guy? Is he trying to be the new Messiah? There's something demonic about this. There's something wrong with this. And a lot of people are like, I don't know, there's something that makes me uneasy about. I mean, plenty of people are praising him. Well, this is a really nice thing to do. This is great. I mean, it's a very heartwarming story to hear about, this guy helping other people, 1,000 people. I mean, I know in my own life, someone in my congregation went from being blind. She went to the school for the blind. She'd been blind her entire life. She had a surgery. She didn't even need glasses anymore. It took months for her brain to learn how to process what she was seeing so she could actually technically see. This is a true and real thing. But people are like, great, that's amazing. But there's something really weird about this, isn't there? Now, I don't know. There's some negative reaction. There's some people saying, he's getting rich yet again with his stunt. I don't know about him. I don't really, I don't care that much about him. But I think there is something about that reaction. That's something like, there's something so demonic about this, I can't even articulate what it is. And for me, it's just this sense of we're so entrenched in this is nice, isn't this great? We're so entrenched in how things are that we fail to see in some way the insanity that we are living in a world where some millionaire is donating money for a simple surgery so that people can see. Why do we need a millionaire to pay for a surgery for somebody to see in the United States of America in 2022? I mean, this is what makes me really sick and tired of heartwarming stories. I kind of hate them now almost. Teen continues to raise money for mom, saving up to buy a food truck. What? Why? Daughter starts lemonade stand to raise money for her mom's surgery. Why does a daughter have to raise money at a lemonade stand for the surgery? Firefighters raise money to fight cancer. Are we not paying to fight cancer? What is happening? I know I write a check to the government 4 times a year. We're not fighting cancer? We have to have firefighters raise money to fight cancer? Kids start charities for the rainforest. I mean, I appreciate the effort and the generosity and the heart and the soul and the need and the work to desire others and to love others and to make the world a different place, but also, why are we raising money for things that should already be funded? Why do we have fundraisers for schools and libraries and sports teams and life-saving operations? I mean, go to GoFundMe and see how many people are trying to raise money to get leukemia treatments or kidney transplants. Why are we looking for handouts from millionaires and billionaires when we should live in a world where we don't have to worry about suffering and dying from preventable illnesses? Jesus in the Apocalypse to Matthew ends it like this. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." I'm reading this fast because you know this. Then the righteous will answer, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? When was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me. Then he will say to those on his left hand, you who are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not welcome me, naked and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison and you did not visit me. Then they will answer, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or naked or a stranger or sick or in prison and did not care for you? Then he will answer, truly I tell you, just as you did not do it for the least one of these, you did not do it for me. We hear that and we think, oh, I should be a nice person. That's not what that's about. It's the nations that gather around the throne. It's the peoples together. I mean, yes, we can interpret this and take away, a personal significance. But the meaning of that story is about societies and cultures and peoples. This is a judgment of a people and how it treated the least in its societies, those who are suffering in its societies, those who are sick and naked and hungry and thirsty. Not of you sitting there, but of all of us together. And it's a story that comes at the end of an age and the beginning of a new one. Some of you might remember my sermon on Stonehenge. Anyone remembers that? How people that built Stonehenge had recently given up agriculture for a nomadic herding and gathering life. The controversy about Mr. Beast, about heartwarming stories, about Davos and International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, the Democrats and the Republicans, Amazon and Google, is because we cannot imagine the foundations of our lives in any other way. It's always just some slightly tweaked thing that's just kind of like what we have now, but just a little bit better. This current arrangement becomes our reality. A few fabulously rich, some of us in the middle, and a growing number of us at the bottom. There are ways up and down the ladder, but the ladder's always there, and it always has been there, and the rungs are always the same. That human society is static. But our shared life together, our human society isn't static, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. I don't know if you've read The Dawn of Everything. You've probably heard me talk about it. Some of my sermons, so the sermon about Stonehenge came out of that. It's a wonderful book. David Graeber has this wonderful quote in it. The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make and could just as easily make differently. The ultimate hidden truth. It is a hidden truth because we really kind of don't quite believe it. We really believe we're living in reality. But we have made that reality. And we could just as easily make it differently. I'm not saying we change the laws of physics. I'm saying our shared life together. The words of all these apocalypses in our Bible, right? The Daniel, Jesus, the Magnificat of Mary, the words of Paul telling us that now there is no longer slave or free, Jew or Gentile, even male and female, but all are one in Christ. These are all announcements that everything can change. And the words of Jesus tell us what direction we should be changing into, where our future lies. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, We'll talk about this more in the annual meeting, but for me, that's what the challenge of the Reimagination Project is. If all we wanted to do was sell the land and get some money, we'd already be done. Trust me. And I'm sure there are even people running around wondering why we haven't done that. But that's not what we want to do with the, granted, small amount of power we have in our little corner of the world. Jesus guides us with a different vision. We want to do something more. We want to pay attention to the apocalyptic call of Jesus in Matthew 25, to make sure we are doing something not just for ourselves, but for our community, that in whatever way we can help to make the world different. And that work takes imagination. It takes creativity. The kind of imagination that can see a collection of sheep and goats in front of a great throne, can imagine two celestial figures standing on either side of a heavenly stream, measuring the passage of time until the culmination of an age. Can imagine winged beasts covered with eyes, dragons and beasts arising from the sea, rivers of blood, clouds of smoke, the stars falling from the heavens. It is imagination. Imagination that can guide our hands to new and different work for a different world. A special creativity that can imagine that work as a hug from God. That work is serving with all people and all creation until we are all loved back into God's loving embrace. Amen.